Hi you guys. Today we're going to make a hamburger in Illustrator. So the first thing I want you to do is go to the program folder and open Adobe Illustrator. Once this is open, you can close your program folder, go to File, New, and as soon as your document opens, you're going to select 8.5 by 11 under Size. That's letter, also 8.5 by 11, and you can change your units where you see picas to inches. And here you'll see 11 inches by 8.5 inches. Let's make sure your orientation is horizontal. If I click on vertical, you see my width and height change. I want landscape or horizontal, so the width is 11 inches and height is 8.5 inches. Under custom, let's just say basic CMYK. That's for your new document profile, and let's name this Hamburger and your initials. And let's tell this OK. Well, mine ended up vertical, so I'm going to go to my artboard. If you'll look over here above the hand tool, that's going to put my page in an editing mode, and at the top I still have an option for changing the mode, and I'm going to change mine to landscape and click on the selection tool. Now my document is still a letter size but landscaped. The first thing we're going to do is get your swatches. Go to Window, show your swatches. You want gradients, swatches, and color, and I'm going to unnest my stroke and just close it with that little button. You can nest all of your palettes by combining them just like so. I'm going to pull gradient out, color out, and so I have 3 individual palettes, and as a time or a space saver, I'm going to nest the palettes together. So I'm going to drop color next to swatch and gradient next to color, and I can access each one by clicking on the tab, or I can drag them apart just like so. So to start out, I'm going to nest my palettes, and you can do this however you want. I'm going to make sure my tools are out and all of your palettes are under Window in the menu. Here you see Tools. The check mark is checked because they're out. I can see Gradient. I'm going to Swatches and Color, and it's only going to access each palette that's nested. To begin with, I'm going to use my plug-in tools, and under the typing tool, if I click on my rectangular tool and hold that down, I'll get a choice of different plugins. I'm going to choose the ellipse tool and start out by just making basically an ellipse, just like this on the page, but I want it to look like a bun, a hamburger bun. So I'm going to click on my solid color in the background and create somewhat of a toasty little bun color. And as you can see, I've chosen a little bit of magenta, 34%, and my yellow is about, I'm going to say 45%, and maybe my K is about 20%. That should give me a nice toasty bun color. Now I do not want a stroke, so I'm going to go back to my tools, click on my stroke or outline color, and say None. In doing so, this is going to make my bun a little more realistic looking. So to begin with, I'm going to also create a gradient. So I'm going to pull my gradients down, and in my swatches, I'm going to drag the same hamburger color here that I just made, and I'm going to add it to my swatches just like so. Just drag and drop. And I'm going to drop that swatch right on top of my gradient and pull out my white tab. Now remember, to have a gradient you have to have two colors. I'm now going to select a darker brown and drag that down and pop that right on top of the black and save my gradient. I like to save a linear and a radial gradient, so I'm going to select both and save them. Now if I select my bun or my elliptical shape, I can come over here and select my radial gradient that I just made. I'm now going to cut this bun in half. So go to your tools, and behind your eraser you're going to have scissors and a knife tool. I'm going to select the knife tool. At this point I want to slice all the way through my circle, making this a hamburger bun. But I have to select it first. So with my selection tool, I'll select my bun, go to my knife tool, and starting outside my object, I'm going to cut all the way through and following this elliptical shape. If you look at the bottom of this circular shape, that's the same angle I'm going to cut on to create a repeated shape and fool the eye. Close enough for government work. So I cut all the way through the bun. Now it's grouped. So I have to deselect my object, and with my white arrow I can select the top bun and move this apart. If I want to smooth these objects, I can go to the pencil tool, hold that down, and go to Smooth tool. That allows me to redraw my shape and smooth out those rough little edges, just like so. Kind of like a little cheater stick, huh? Okay, now I've got a bun. I'm now going to create the meat for the bun. So with my rectangular tool, I think I'll choose the rounded rectangular tool, and I'm going to make a long rectangular shape and select brown, sort of a meat color. Now I'm going to use my effect. So in your menu bar, if you go to Effect, Distort, and Roughen. This gives you some options for roughening up an object. I can select smooth, corner, my size, how much detail I want to use. So I'm going to click on Preview, and that's way too rough. That looks like that would hurt your mouth, huh? So I'm going to take my detail down to about maybe 3, and I want smooth little corners, and maybe I want my size to be less. I'm going to use 3% on my size, maybe 3 or 2 on detail. I'm going to change that to 3. And I'm going to take it back to smooth and say OK. Now I can always edit this. I can make it a little larger, a little smaller, and I'm going to put it right on top of the bun, just like so. However, I want the top bun to be on top of the meat, so I'm going to click on the very top part of my hamburger bun, go to Object, Arrange, and Bring to Front. There. It's not too bad. And I can now kind of adjust and move the smaller bun up or shrink that meat just a little bit. I'm going to kind of edit that just a bit. There we go. Now for real meat eaters, you can change that up and tweak it if you'd like. I think I'll make my bun a little darker to create a little better contrast. The meat a little darker than the bun. Okay, now I'm going to move the bun down just a little bit by selecting it all. And we're going to use your Pathfinder palette. This is a wonderful palette. Go to Window and Pathfinder. And this little tool right here allows you to combine, to divide, to intersect all different types of objects. I'm going to start out and create some tomatoes. So I'm going to go back to my plugins and select the elliptical tool. And I'm going to make this red. I'll change it to a little more of an orangey red. Now I've already saved the hamburger bun gradient, so I'm going to make a gradient for the tomato and drag the browns out and kind of get this a little pale look here for the tomato, and do something like this. And I'm going to save my gradient, and I'm going to make a linear just in case I want to use linear. At this point, I'm going to copy and paste. So edit and copy, edit and paste, and I now have 2 tomatoes. However, I'm going to make this 1 tomato and divide my shape. So holding down Shift, I'm going to make my tomato shape just a little smaller and place that on top. So now with 2 shapes, as you can see, I'm going to divide my shape. So with your Pathfinder and selecting both objects, I'm going to go to the very bottom icon where it says divide and click. Now this object is still grouped together, so I will go to Object and Ungroup. I have to deselect that object, move these apart, and as you can see, it's left a ring for my tomato. So I'm going to get rid of that excess part, and now I can change the gradient on the very top part of this tomato, making it really look like it has a 3-dimensional feel. If I want, I can go back to the radial gradient and kind of change it just like so. Maybe change my angle. There. And what this does, this tool allows you to change that gradient without always going back to your palette. I'm not real sure if I like this tool, but that's what it's intended for. And on the bottom part of that tomato, I could do the same thing. I could change just the angle of the bottom part of that gradient. Finding a realistic gradient angle is going to be the hardest part. Okay, I'm going to make this a little darker. I still don't like it. There. Now if I select that object, both parts, and say Object and Group, I'm going to copy. By the way, these are your keyboard commands out to the side. So copy would be Command C, and paste would be Command V. Now I don't want these tomatoes to look identical, so I'm going to edit the shape just a little bit and maybe change the gradient, which by the way, my gradient tool is this little gray box down here at the bottom. And let's see how this looks. It's somewhat different than the previous tomato. And I'm going to rotate by just moving my mouse along the outer edge of my bounding box. Copy and paste again. By the way, I did that by holding down the Option key and dragging. Change my gradient. I'm trying to kind of keep a different look going on here. And I think I'll copy one more tomato and change the angle to that as well. In fact, let's pull this little guy down here. The whole object is I want these tomatoes to kind of slip out from the edge of the tomato, of the bun, I'm sorry. Now, the best part of this little project, you're learning how to make shapes, be creative, use new tools, use gradients, use the Pathfinder palette for cutting, dividing, uniting. And now we're going to use a tool that is paste in front or paste in back, which is different than send to front and send to back. I'm going to select all of my tomatoes. I'm going to just drag a box around those tomatoes with my selection tool and tell that to group, object and group. Now I want to place all of my hamburger objects very specifically in certain places. I have to use paste in front and paste in back to do that. So the first thing I do, I need to cut my tomatoes. So I'll go to Edit and Cut. Now I think I'll put those tomatoes on top of the meat patty. I want those tomatoes on top of the meat patty and underneath the top bun. So I'm going to click on the meat patty and go back to Edit and say Paste in Front. I want them to be on top of the meat. And when I move these tomatoes and drag and drop, they're going to slip right behind the top bun and on top of that meat patty. I can also rotate this whole stack of tomatoes as one solid group. Kind of like that. I think I like that better. There we go. Now I'm going to do the same thing with onions. I don't particularly like onions on my hamburger. They're awfully pretty. Let me make one little quick adjustment here. This tomato looks just a little bit scary, a little bit weak. And I'm going to adjust the gradient just for that too. There we go. You can edit these shapes at any point. So to make onions, I'm going to create kind of a nice purple color. Now I save my tomato colors in my swatches. So now I'm going to drag purple into my gradients and maybe make this sort of, let me go to my color. I clicked on my color tab and I'm going to make this sort of a kind of a yellow tannish. You've seen tomatoes that look like, onions. I've got tomatoes on the brain. There. So I'm going to do something kind of like this and move my little diamond right about here, where I don't have quite so much purple. And I'm doing this for effects. Remember, this is graphic design, so we're trying to create kind of a nice color flow. So I'm going to go back to my swatches and drop my onions that gradient right into my swatches. I'm going to now copy and paste. Again, I held down Option to do this. And I will adjust my gradients just a little bit. And I'll do the same thing on this little onion. Maybe drag that over just a tad for a little more purple. And I'm going to copy and paste each onion ring here, leaving the inside circle quite a bit smaller to where I have somewhat of a ring. Can you see that kind of outside ring? This looks like a bowl, doesn't it? And I'm going to do the same thing on the second one. If you hold down Shift, you can actually keep that scaled in proportion as you change the size. Now I'm going to select both objects for my first onion, and under Pathfinder I will divide that. Again, this is grouped, so I have to delete, divide, and I did this because I wanted my onion rings to be different colors. I could also kind of misshape this a little bit if I wanted, so it's not quite such a perfect onion ring. You see, maybe something somewhat irregular like that. Now I'm going to put this ring on top of the other one and kind of shrink the one here in the back. And copy and paste. Kind of change my angles a little bit. Remember, different sizes and shapes create interest. Maybe kind of rotate that somewhat. Take this little guy, pull it down here. Rotate this. You're creating a hamburger to sell. Okay, let me try this. So I'm going to select all of the onions and go to Object and Group. Next thing, I'm going to cut, edit, and cut. Now to paste this exactly where I want it, I'm going to use the edit, either paste in front or paste in back command. So, shall we put the onions on top of the tomatoes? Let's just practice. So I have to select the object that I want those onions to target. So I'm going to click on tomato, go to edit and say paste in front, and at this point I'm going to scale these suckers down a little bit, drag and drop, and there my onions go exactly on top of those tomatoes. I can actually edit these and maybe rotate these just a little bit. Again, I'm looking for a nice visual more than anything at this point. Okay, I like it. I like it, so I'm going to leave that. Now, let's go for some lettuce. I'm going to go back to my plugins, and I think I'll use my polygon tool. Now what I'm doing, I'm trying to show you very easy plugins to use using your Pathfinder to divide objects and your paste in front in order to place your objects. So I'm going to create a polygon shape and select green for lettuce. Now I will go back to Effect and Distort and Transform, and I think I'll say zigzag. I'm going to click on Preview, and I want smooth corners. Maybe pick up the ridges here. It's too much, so I'm going to take it back to about maybe a 3 or about a 4. And I want my size to be a little bit larger. I'm going to go to 14 points and say OK. Now, right now that looks kind of like a splat on the wall, so I have to shear it. Go to your tools, and right below your knife tool, you see your rotation tool? The tool right to the right should say scale. But everywhere you've got a black arrow, if you hold that down on your tool, you'll get a pop-up, and I want shear. So I'm going to click and lock my object in one point so I can pull and shear my object without having it jump all over the page. Maybe kind of tweak it, pull it like so. There, I like that. So I'm going to take my lettuce and copy and paste, kind of pull it, rotate it, make it look like a different piece of lettuce, and I'll change the color a little, and copy and paste that, and tweak that just a little. And change the color of that, and maybe send it to the back. Object, arrange, send to back. And I think I'll make that a nice dark color too. Scale it down just a little bit. Now this looks very uniform, but again, only part of your object is going to actually show. So I'm going to do this and maybe rotate this little guy. I like that. I'm going to select my lettuce, say Object and Group, Edit and Cut. Where should we put the lettuce? Why don't we put that under the onions? So I'm going to select the onions, say Edit and paste it back, and I'm going to drag and drop. There we go. Now you don't have just perfect little round zigzaggy looking circles for lettuce. It kind of gives you somewhat of a little loose feel, and I can still even rotate this a little if I want, or rotate it back where I see a little lettuce shooting out of the back here. And I think I'll pull those tomatoes in somewhat. I kind of like it was. Okay, you can add pickles, you can add bacon, you can add anything you want to this hamburger, but I'm going to now add cheese and make it a cheeseburger. So go to your rectangular tool, and I'm going to start out with just basically a square, something kind of like American cheese. However, I want this to have enough contrast that it doesn't blend in with the tomatoes or with the burger. So I think I'll go to color, and create sort of a white, kind of maybe a provolone or a Swiss, something that's a little bit lighter in color. Maybe kind of like that. And I'm going to make a gradient. So I'm going to pull that color into my gradients, and I think I'll create sort of a nice orange. I don't want molded looking cheese. So I'm going to kind of warm this up with a little bit of a warm orangey color. And in my swatches, I'm going to save my color and create a linear as well. And that's what I'll use for cheese. So at this point, I'm going back to my gradient tool, and maybe do something kind of like so, because overall I want this to have really a pretty light look to it. There you go. I don't want it to look half and half. I just want it to look maybe a little lighter on the edge. Maybe something like that. Okay. Now I'm going to shear my cheese. Select your tool with your selection tool. Select your cheese. And again, your shear tool is right next to the rotation tool. And I'm going to say shear. I'm going to lock my cheese on one corner and pull with the other, and voila, I have a piece of cheese. You may want to make a few more adjustments with the gradient tool, but not too much. There, I kind of like that. Alrighty, So I'm going to select my cheese, go to Edit and Cut, and where should we put our cheese? How about on top of the meat? The meat's probably hot, so the cheese would melt. So I'm going to select the meat, go back to Edit, and say Paste in Front. And let's just drag and drop that cheese and see what happens. Perfect. I like it. The color's a little bit light out here, so I think I'll create a little more of the yellow in that cheese. And there, that's not too bad. In fact, I think I'll just make that altogether kind of a cheesy color. And I can lighten the first color with my color palette here. And I'm going to just kind of lighten that up a little bit. And I think I'll darken my second color. Okay, but I have to save this color. So back to my swatches and save my new cheese color. And now if I select cheese, I can go back to my darker cheese color and readjust the color of the cheese. And you can just sit here and do this until you're happy with something you have. Okay, I think I'll make that cheese look a little melty. So go to your pen tool, and if I hold this tool down, I can slide all the way over to the right and tear it off. With the last tool on the right, looks like an upside down V, that is my convert. And that tool will convert a corner into a curve. So selecting my cheese first, I'm going to convert this corner and make it round instead of so sharp. And with the white arrow, I can edit that shape. I can shorten it, sharpen it, curve it. I think I'll kind of make this a little bit drippy looking out here. Maybe kind of like that. In the back with my white arrow, I can edit that shape. There. So now it looks like the cheese is kind of melting a little, and I'll need to do the same thing out here on the edge. So with my convert tool, I'll just do the same thing. I just have to be careful I don't get that in a little kink. You can kind of kink your shape up there if you're not careful. Okay, I like my hamburger. I think I need to adjust the gradient. So I'm going to my white arrow and I'm going to select the top bun. And with my gradient tool, I'm going to move the light to where maybe it's a little more to one side. I have to do the same thing with the bottom bun, because that would be a light source that's sort of hitting in the same place, you see. There. I like it. So I'm going to move my little plugins and my little pen tools over, and I'm going to make an olive. I'm going to finish this off with an olive. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to select my whole hamburger, move it up just a little bit, and I think I'll make a plate. With my plugins, I'm going back to my elliptical tool, and I'll just make a little plate like so and send that to the back. The only problem, there's not enough contrast. So maybe I'll make that turquoise. Actually, did you know that orange is what stimulates the appetite? Orange and yellow, excuse me, orange or brown. But I think I'll make this kind of a turquoise color. Just like so. And I'm going to copy and paste that and send that to the back and make it a little darker blue. So therefore, it looks like the plate has a little bit of a lip to it. On the top part of the plate, this turquoise, I'm going to make a new gradient. So I think I will just create a dark gray. In fact, I'll just use a gray that already exists in the swatches. And there I can create somewhat of a shadow. Okay. To make this a little darker, I could actually expand that somewhat, and that might be a little bit better. There we go. You can see that darkening a little. Now I'm going to make an olive. I'll save my gradient, and with my elliptical tool, I'm going to create kind of an olive color, but I'm going to have to create that. So I'm going to start out with kind of a medium green and add a little magenta. My blue or cyan is 71%, magenta is 49%, my yellow is 100%, and we'll make black 4%. And what that does, all of those CMYK colors, the primary colors, when they're mixed together, they kind of make a brown. So we have sort of a muddy green with primarily the color being yellow and blue, and I like it. So I'm going to take that color and drag it into my gradients. The other side of my gradient, I think I'll make a little more of a yellowy green, not quite so dark. There. Take some of the black out, and I'm going to go to Swatches and save that gradient as well. Now I can change the angle or the color of my olive and maybe put a tad of pimento in here, you know, that little red color that not everybody likes, and drag and drop it right here on top to create an illusion that that could possibly be an olive with a filling. There we go. So again, I'm going to select both objects and group. And copy and paste. I think I'll rotate one olive. If I can get my tool to cooperate. Maybe make it a little bit larger. And there I've got a nice little grouping of olives. I'm going to select and drag and drop right on top of my hamburger. But I need a toothpick. So with my pen tool, I believe that I will just click and make a tiny little pointy straight line, kind of like that, and pull one olive to the front, to give the appearance that it's going through the olive. And the second one, I'll just kind of bring that to the front. I'm taking a shortcut here. Kind of, sort of. Let me rotate this olive. And I'm going to cut my toothpick. I'm going to use my knife and move my toothpick over and kind of realign that. Bring it to the front to where it kind of appears to go through the second olive. And I think I'll change that. I'm going to make it blue. No, I think I'll make it brown. And I'm going to make the bottom part brown. I guess it was that color as well. Kind of, sort of. Okay, now I'm done with my hamburger. If you want to add seeds, you could put some little seeds here. Make a little poppy seed. I'll use a gradient that I already have. In fact, that's the gradient I believe I used for my buns. And I maybe kind of change the angle on that. I could blow this up a little bit and help you out, I guess. Here we go. Let's see here. I'm trying to create just enough of a light on top of that one little seed there to make that kind of fun. And I'm going to reshape it more like that. Alright, I'm going to go back and say actual size, and I will now just drag that little seed and hold down my command key and just drag a few of these little guys where I think they might look good. Kind of strategically place these. We could actually do this with a symbol, but I don't want to get into symbols right now. That could start really kind of confusing things, and this is a great lesson. It's fun. It gives you an opportunity to learn a lot of tools in Illustrator and at the same time create objects of your choice and colors and come up with your own creation. So there we have a hamburger using the Pathfinder tool for cutting your shapes and primarily using Edit, Paste in Front, and Paste in Back command for placing objects where you want them. Be sure and save this. File, Save, and I'm going to put this in, you put it in your student folder, whether it's A Day or B Day, and for right now, I'm just going to put mine in the program folder. Enjoy!